Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown, joined with my excellent co-host, fantastic James Rhodes, on this Monday afternoon. How you doing, mate? How was your weekend?
Yeah, pretty good. Got a little break from the heat and everything, but otherwise nice and relaxing.
Well, enjoy your break because you're not going to get one this week. You're going
I
to be
know.
in my neck of woods, of course. United play Arsenal this week in LA, and it is absolutely baking out here. But really looking forward to seeing everyone, seeing United here this weekend, and of course seeing your lovely self. And make sure you bring your wallet because we'll have worked up a thirst by the
Right.
weekend, so it will need to be quenched. You see,
Mm.
I will take no prisoners on that. So, but obviously, lots of stuff to talk about. We've got the game at the weekend that United played Rangers, the Yoro stuff, and of course, never ending transfer rumors and some very encouraging stuff that's been going
Yeah.
on. And I was thinking this morning, there's been so much going on in the world, and there's lots of concerns about how people are doing. And my first thought was, I just wonder how Gabby Agbonlahore's doing with Ineos and how they're moving. I mean, that poor lad must be absolutely devastated. I'm sure he's sitting there questioning life choices right now and wondering how he's going to handle fully functioning Manchester United that are moving as they are.
Yeah, you would imagine so. I mean, it's been amusing and interesting to watch people for the first time in a while be a bit pissed off about United and what they're doing. I mean, I've been seeing Liverpool fans and Chelsea fans
Mm.
starting to get their own, hashtag owners out things going here and saying, look
Yeah.
at United now. We need the Glazers
Mhm.
back. Look at what they're doing. This is a bit scary for us. And it should
Well,
be. And it is because it's true. I
oh,
mean, I think that, obviously we'll talk about it more, but that Lenny Euro thing kind of sent like almost shockwaves through
yeah.
the
Well,
whole industry in terms of like it's almost like you make your mark when you arrive, and I think that's why they push so hard on it. Is that was for sure making a mark.
there's a couple of things there, James, and I will get to that. One of the things that was a bit amusing to me was the reaction of other fans to United
Mm,
signing Euro, which was a bit like a jilted ex. And
yeah,
some even Everton fans
yeah,
taking offense that they didn't pursue Brantwaite. I'm looking at this and I'm going, I don't know what it's like to look at United from an external perspective as
yeah, yeah.
another fan and feel that resentment, but it's an indication of just how much psychological trauma United have imposed on people in the past that, despite their recent travails, it has not healed. But the other thing that it's doing, which is quite interesting, is it's also messing with the minds of a number of journalists who've relied on very lazy criticisms of United and tropes of United about overpaying and being calamitous in the transfer market, being scattergunned and having no strategy, and now they're going to have to find new ways, creative ways to find criticism. I'm sure there's certain people, I won't name them, who can always find the negative and every positive. Will help them with that. But it's quite interesting because there's a number of people now going, well, what are we going to do to criticize United now?
I know, and I read no, I didn't read it because I didn't think it was worth the 30 seconds it might have taken to read it. But I saw an article that came out the other day about United have had a great start to the window, but here's 10 ways it could go
Oh,
wrong.
I
And
know.
I was like,
He's very loud at that. We could have a nuclear bomb at any minute and everything could go wrong. Fuck, please, anything will happen. Jesus Christ. It could be a
I
massive
thought that
sinkhole
was
that could open up
hilarious.
outside Old Trafford and players could fall in. I mean, it's
Yeah, I
absolute.
have no idea what was inside that, but just the concept of thinking this is all I can figure out to put together to stir up some drama towards United, I thought was hilarious and definitely a good thing. I mean, but look at it, right? You know, Mason Greenwood was sold with the least bit of noise by United. Clean, simple, smooth. Didn't have to stir up a bunch of drama. Jadon Sancho returned back to United with nothing. Quiet, simple, clean. Two sentences. That was it.
Mhm.
Nothing else. We're not providing people much ammunition to write stories and do the things they usually do, are we?
if United were to win the league this year, get close to it, I'm convinced there'd be a number of people letting bioweapons off before they can actually confront that reality, right? It's like, let Armageddon happen before, because I'm genuinely concerned about certain people, a number of people, how they would psychologically reconcile that outcome. But nonetheless, let's talk about the Lenny Euro thing for a second, because I was thinking about this and I was going, when was the last time, no matter what position United were in, whether they were champions, European champions, whatever, beat Real Madrid to a player that they actually wanted, or Barcelona or a big club where they pursued a player, United pursued a player, and United came out on top? When was I can't remember, but the fact that United managed to do that when they finished 8th, and of course people will, Real Madrid didn't really want them, because Real Madrid typically pursue players they don't want, but yet convince this kid to come to United. No one needs to tell United about the potential of whether it will get fulfilled or not. It could go wrong. We've seen it a million times. We don't know, but that's not the point. Point is that they secured an exceptional young talent ahead of the European champions, a club that everyone dreams of playing for, and convinced them on ambition to come to United, not for money, but for the football reasons. That is credit where it's due. I was critical of Ineos 3 or 4 weeks ago, and my opinion will always be based on evidence and information, and I have to give them enormous credit for that.
For sure. Well, exactly. I mean, I can't think of a time. We've beaten clubs in England on a number of occasions. United as an English club still holds a lot of prestige to a lot of people, but the quiet thing you say underneath that is it sure had something to do with offering 300,000 to kids who are young still, like Jadon Sancho. Not to blame him, but we offered massive wages, and that's how we would win players in the past. I mean, to the extent that there was no way they were getting anywhere close like that at other clubs. And I think that when you're not in a position to succeed, or you haven't been succeeding as much, you can afford to do a little bit of a wage bump, a little bit of a financial incentive to join, but not to the degree that we used to. Yeah. And Lenny Yoro's not on 300,000 a week. That's not why he came to United. And no, I cannot remember a time. We missed out on Camavinga, we missed out on Tchouaméni, we missed out on center backs. I think Rudiger, not a young player, we tried to sign him. So many back in the day as well that we missed out on.
You need Bellingham, Holland, everything. You just every exceptional young talent that United went in for. As soon as they had serious competition, they lost them.
Yep. We got a lot of the ones on the way out, right? That's what we've been getting. And it was like this was like making right, and like you say, even all the way back years and years ago, making right the wrongs of the past. When Sir Alex was manager and we were one of the best teams in the world, we missed out on Rafael Varane. And now we didn't, in almost a repeat situation. We've got one of the best young center backs in the world, and he chose United over Madrid. And that is certainly a mark, of what they're doing. And as well, that the fact that they did it. This wasn't an accident. This was the people involved that have been appointed, doing it. There's a good breakdown The Athletic did, right? And it's Jason Wilcox having the conversations with him as he did with Xerxes. This is how you're going to play football, people, right? You imagine that conversation with Ed Woodward,
right there.
With Ed Woodward having that conversation. Can you believe it? The difference it would make.
Ed Woodward was at Manchester United for financial reasons. Correct. So he is assuming that that's why everybody wants to come to United. For the same reason I'm here, for the same reason everyone else is here, for the same reason the Glazers are here. We'll pay you a lot of money because that's what convinces people.
Talk about anything else. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, you need only look at the insanity of David De Gea's contract. I mean, Xerxes is being paid less than what Brandon Williams was being paid, James. Right? And this was given to him by Ed Woodward. I mean, the absolute financial, recklessness, really a scandalous assault on Manchester United finances to do stuff like this, to not have any respect, for the football club, and not be able to predict, like, hey, maybe we don't want to convince people that the only reason to come here is money, because they need to identify with the sporting project. Let me borrow that word for a second. And football people that know how to sell a football club on its merits, who get the
Yes.
trust of the player that says, look, we're going to follow through on our promises. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do this, 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 this. And it's not just at first team level. We now see, them going after this kid, the kid at Arsenal. I'm don't want to
Yes.
butcher his name.
Yes.
So, GD,
Yep.
forgive me.
Obi Martin. Yeah.
Obi
Right.
Martin, yes.
Yep. Yep.
And you see now Dan Ashworth talking about this in his interview about, the football club at all levels will now, be run properly, and very, very encouraging. But this is absolutely so. It's so encouraging, because it's what United fans have been screaming for years. I mean, let's just compare Lenny Yoro. If this was any other year, we'd still be United are comfortable with the situation. John Murdoch's in Lille for the 1400th time, and there'd be, bids, and just be the nauseating, mind-numbing stuff. Like I can't take any more of this. But within a week, done, signed, revealed in the first team, you're like, whoa, what is this?
I know.
I feel like someone's just performed a Heimlich remover on United, and they've coughed up, Joel and Avi Glazer.
I know. I mean, when we saw him walk out like on Saturday, and where he's in training Friday, right? There was a video of him going into training straight away, and I was like, "What is this? I need 2 more weeks of drama before he can make it into the training ground and on the pitch." And I'm like,
Imagine what
and
that
there
does.
he is.
Yeah. That kills the
Yeah.
media. Endless updates of nothing.
Yep. Yep. And then there he is playing the next day, and you get to see it and see why we bought him right away. It's special. I mean, I could not be more excited after that. It's completely helped to restore a lot of that motivation. Like, this isn't just words. And we were saying for a bit there, like, Ineos need to get a win now, and they've full credit to them, because after the weirdness of how the financial years play out now, it's been 22 days since July 1st. July 22nd today when we're recording this, and 2 really good signings before they're off to the US. The only reason he's not there, Xerxes, right now, is of course because the Euros and the holidays and all of that. 2 really, really top young players that they had huge competition for. Xerxes was on the cusp of joining AC Milan, Lenny Yoro to Madrid, and they got him in time, and no fuss about it. And I mean, the strategy even of how they got Lenny Yoro is impressive. There's no way anyone would have ever thought. It was just very clever when you read about it, going through Lille, and the way that it's all been pushed together to make it work, and to push the time up, and to get him in time. Just smart moves. And it's like, it's going to be nice when it's not a surprise anymore, that this happens. And I feel like that's where we're getting at. I'm expecting, their next move to be just as smart and intelligent.
But even with the Mason Greenwood sale, no drawn out saga, no comment from the club, just done, bump out of the way, and there was almost minimal reaction to it. I mean, you obviously inevitably had different individuals commenting on it, but nothing like the mess that United had last summer, right? And it was done quickly without major fuss. It was the right decision to make. And this is something that we've been screaming for, that now they're earning my trust. Now I'm looking at this, and look, some of the lack of trust came from residual trauma from what we've seen before, where it was like, once bitten, twice shy. You're going to have to show me before I accept your words. And this is really, really encouraging. Look, they still have a lot to do, right? This could still go really wrong, but I'm not thinking like that. I'm thinking about, okay, I'm not trusting the competence of these people. I'm not trusting the fact that you're looking at individuals. Omar Barada, when was his official start date? July 14th?
13th,
yeah.
13th.
So essentially, him and Ashworth have been in the job 3 weeks. Because Ashworth started, 1st of July?
Yeah.
So between Barada, technically, he's been in that position just over a week. And in his first week, he secured one of the best young talents in Europe. That's fucking incredible, man. I'm sorry.
It is.
You know,
Yeah,
because
it's
I mean, that's not because of his, you know, his image. He's just you don't sign for Omar Barada, you sign for Manchester United. You only
correct.
sign for Omar Barada if he can sell the football club to you.
Correct. And like you say, you know, it's like there's so many ways things can go, but it's sort of unimportant. We've talked about this a lot, that, you know, outcomes are never guaranteed on anything, right? There's never a guaranteed outcome. But you get to the right outcomes by having the right process. Success isn't an accident, neither is failure. And when you follow the right processes, you give yourself the best chance of positive outcomes and the best outcomes. And we can see that there is a correct process and a correct way of doing things that they're moving forward with. It's not planned failure. These are not the signings. These are not the actions. These are not the things that you are doing if you're planning to be mediocre, if you're planning to not push forward, if you're planning to not be good enough. These are the things you do if you intend to be successful, if you want to be successful, and then you keep working at it to do the best things you can to make it, to get there. And there is no guarantees, and things are going to take time. There's no doubt about that, and not everything is going to pan out.
Of course.
But we know it's not guaranteed failure anymore. That's for sure.
Yeah, look, you do the right things. You know, failure is part of anything where human beings are involved. City fail. You know, City sign players that don't work out. Oh, Mateus
Yeah,
Nunes, Calvin
plenty.
Phillips. That's part of the process, because you can't guarantee an outcome for any human being. And you know, people overestimate the influence of managers and, you know, backroom
Mm-hmm.
staff on the
Yep.
outcome of players. You know, one of the hardest things to predict in anything is human behavior. You know,
Yep.
even within yourself, and to control someone else's human behavior is impossible. So, very, very, very encouraging. Um, Obviously, there's some other things that are being discussed. Will Manuel Ugarte move to Manchester United? Will he not? There's lots of credible rumors that PSG are interested in Jadon Sancho. Surely, to me, if PSG are interested in Jadon Sancho, would a swap deal not be obvious for Ugarte?
Yeah, for sure it would. I think it would make sense for both parties because, you know, there's going to be, from what I can kind of gather, there's questions, of course, on both sides, right? You know, United looking at it and saying, well, you know, we don't want to pay a huge premium on Ugarte, who's only been there 1 year and apparently are unhappy with. Maybe they're not, you know, I think we have to approach and look at this a little bit differently than Xerxes and Yoro, right? Because with Xerxes and Yoro, that was sort of part one of the plan. It was obvious that these were the two players they were not going to miss. They needed them. They wanted those guys, right? I don't think we necessarily have those kind of names now in terms of the rest of the players they're looking at in the market. And that's not to say they're not good players, but I think there's a difference, right, between your young, unmissable talents who are on the rise versus when you're looking at, you know, players that are good players, but you're maybe there's some questions, or you know, they're more solving a specific need or a problem than they are just an unmissable opportunity that you want to be involved in. And I think Ugarte falls in there. And so they're going to want to have some reasonable finances associated with it, so it's not a big risk. And in terms of Jadon Sancho, you look at how they've approached it, suddenly you've got an asset. You know, he made it into the team and played, and I thought actually played pretty well. Worked hard, did a decent job of it, and it just another mark on. We were kind of talking about how Jadon Sancho returns to the team quietly, simply, the way that he did it, right into the team, played, worked hard, and there was no fuss online anywhere with fans. There was nothing. It was just calm and easy. And what that means is suddenly Jadon Sancho is an asset for the club. He's an asset. And so when you're looking at a deal like this, yeah, swap makes a lot of sense. Both clubs, you know, work out something of requisite value that reduces the risk on both sides and gives financial benefits to both clubs. That's kind of the advantage of a swap deal. I mean, you could even look at a situation where both could be available in like a loan plus type of option, and that way you minimize risk for both parties and kind of give them time to sort it out. I don't know if that's going to happen with Sancho.
Is it
But
possible they could do something similar to what other clubs have done, where Sancho goes to PSG for 50 million and then Ugarte comes to United for 50 million, where, you know,
yeah,
it's a bit of, you know, a bit of a financial shell game. Now, I would imagine that Ugarte would be on a lot less wages than Jadon Sancho. So in the end result, United would actually win in that.
Yeah, well, because of the way that the finances work, right? You don't really want to do a swap. Swaps don't actually make any sense from an accounting perspective, which is somewhat of this, we've talked before about kind of the silliness of the way that the finances are counted anyway, because you end up doing nonsense for the sake of satisfying these financial rules rather than them actually making any sense. So they wouldn't likely swap. You'd probably see some kind of offer, some kind of deal go, and of course the fees have to be considered reasonable, and they will be assessed to be reasonable, but there's no association between the clubs, so there's going to be very little to no suspicion of any kind. But you probably see something a little less. Like I think United need 30-something million in order to cover the amortization of Jadon Sancho, so they don't take a loss. And that's what they're going to not want to do, is take a loss. PSG need to make about 48 million euros, so maybe 40 million pounds, in order to not take a loss on Ugarte. So I think you might see something where, Sancho, if it materializes, where Sancho goes for 30, 35, maybe with some add-ons, and Ugarte comes for 40 with some add-ons. So it's a little imbalanced because maybe they view Ugarte as worth a little bit more right now, and he does have lower wages, which should be factored into that. But either way, it would give both clubs a good financial kind of incentive, because the buy is stretched over time and they get to wipe off essentially this other player that they have, and it would come out like a small purchase, but a gain of having lost this other player, and kind of be a replacement financially rather than addition. It gets really confusing. It really does. But that's essentially how it could play out, where it is a swap. You're not adding to your financial burden by purchasing this player and letting the other one go. And in the short term, you probably make a little bit of a gain even. But over the 5 years, it'd be about the same.
Yeah, be interesting to see what happens there. And obviously, they're trying to sign John Neves too, from what I understand.
Yes.
So I would imagine they also have to sell. Another one that I want to touch you about was Mazroui from Bayern.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I believe I remember saying to you about 2 months ago that United liked him.
Yes,
if I remember correctly, he's Ajax player too.
Yeah,
So,
he is. He played for Ten Hag as well. Yeah.
So if let's say my Mazroui thing is 100%, I would still suggest to me, James, that Erik ten Hag, despite what he was saying at the weekend about high recruitment and what that has been taken out of his hands, still has a heavy influence, because this was a player United liked last season. Ugarte was a player United liked last season. Xavi Simons was a player that United liked last season. I would suggest to me that Ten Hag still has a massive influence on recruitment.
Potentially, to be fair. The interesting thing is that on that point is that obviously it's hard to know how much influence. Now, one could look at someone like Mazroui and say that he's like fully a Ten Hag kind of target. And when you look at but it is a little bit funny because you take Ligt, for example. We know United liked him before Ten Hag was manager. We know they looked at him 4 or 5 years ago. And Mazroui, I think, is in a bit of both. But at the same time, Xerxes, despite being Dutch, doesn't really have any other connection to Ten Hag, right? Lenny Yoro has nothing to do with him at this point in time. I think Mazroui could be looked at like, you also look at the profile of it. I think they're going to want to look at players and say, we're not going to be spending big on someone we as the club aren't totally sold on. That's for sure. They're not going to make mistakes.
I would agree.
They're not going to do Anthony's. But obviously, when you take Mazroui, it's 15 million for a player that knows the coach, that covers both sides on the fullback side of things, left and right. And that is it's kind of a little bit of a different signing. That's why I say we might see a little difference now, because they're not necessarily looking for players where this is the guy moving forward. They're not looking to upgrade on Diogo Dalot. You know what I mean? They're not. They just aren't. They're looking at Wan-Bissaka is going into the final year of his contract and he wants to leave. Who could we get in? Yeah. And he's not saying he's like downing tools, but he would like to go back to London. We know that, right?
That's correct.
So ideally, they let him go. That's for sure, instead of losing him for free. And then ideally,
obviously, yes.
What's that?
With West Ham being interested, that would be solve that problem.
Yeah, and so it solves a lot of problems to get a backup fullback in who understands the manager, who knows how he plays, who covers both sides, and who's affordable, and that could be a depth signing, and on either end, and solve this problem. To me, it makes a lot of sense, and you're talking a very minimal amount of money. And so what it kind of seems like is a little bit of a game here between West Ham, Wan-Bissaka, and Mazroui, where if they get Mazroui, they're obviously not going to buy Wan-Bissaka. And then I think we'll keep him. If West Ham don't buy him, I think we end up keeping him, frankly. But then if we could get Mazroui and they can't, then we probably end up selling Wan-Bissaka to them and picking him up.
To me, you only keep Wan-Bissaka if you're going to renew his contract.
Yeah.
If you've decided that you will not renew his contract this next year, you sell him now. That's it.
Yeah.
Because you've already decided that he's not for you. That there's a reason why you won't extend his contract. And to me, if you've come to that conclusion, which I believe you need to have, because if they were going to renew his contract, they would have already.
I'm not sure he wants to either, which is also
that's what I'm saying. Yes, so I'm just, from a football club perspective, makes no sense. But this also is the case with Victor Lindelof. Either you renew his contract or you sell him now if you get an offer. And I can understand why United are taking cut price offers on these players, as they are now with a number of players where, you heard Ten Hag say that they convinced him on, the sensibility of selling players before or beyond keeping them too long, which is exactly what they need to do. So, and to be honest, James, we've seen the best of Wan-Bissaka. We've seen the worst of him. Very, very, very good stand-up one-on-one when the ball's in front of him. But if you're a high-pressing team that plays a high line, Wan-Bissaka doesn't fit in that team.
Right.
Because the problem is when you're playing a high line, you're pressing high, your fullbacks are overlapping. He's not very good at that, doesn't give United anything in terms of an attacking option. And if you put the ball in behind Wan-Bissaka, or you need him to be mentally switched on for people, track runners and stuff, he's not. That's not his game. And I don't know if that's a consequence of the fact that the kid said he was a forward before he was a defender, but many defenders are forwards. Most defenders are frustrated forwards, let's be honest, right?
Yoro, I think, said he was a forward.
Most kids, when they start playing football, don't want to be a defender. They want to score goals. And eventually they end up getting put back, and that never really leaves them. They still all want to score goals, right? Because still, the one thing that gives you a higher dopamine rush on the game of football than anything else. And that's why I've always said that you can tell everything that you can't get on an objective scouting report on a team by how they defend. How they defend. This is just like a metaphor for life, because defending is something that people don't want to do. It's a collective endeavor with no individual reward, and it's all about the commitment of the team towards the collective goal. And it's ugly, it's brutal. It's there's nothing that's it's crude. It's just something. So you always tell someone's commitment to a particular cause by the way they do things they don't want to do. It's so for me, Wan-Bissaka, I don't ever see how any team can challenge for a title with a Wan-Bissaka. You see Arsenal going out spending enormous amount of money on Calafiori. I think he's a left back, isn't he?
Bit of both, left center.
Yeah, so there's Zinchenko or two already. The fullback position is really, really important. You see it, City, Kyle Walker, so important to them. Those fullback positions are really, really important, but not just important for the fullbacks. And we've said this about Marcus Rashford. It's important for the players ahead of them. Because just like attackers, midfielders, they're attacking in pairs, they're defending in pairs. And if one of them doesn't do the job right, it heavily affects the other. So that right back position, Dallo did really well there last season. I think that helped Garnacho a lot. But when Wan-Bissaka played, United definitely lost something in terms of attacking. So I think it would definitely be the right decision if they could get 10, 12 million for him and let him go.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of the challenge with this is, to some degree, right, the further you move at the top of the pitch, you want to have a lot of options for attacking. You need it because players go in and out of form, scoring form, different things that you need. And most of your substitutions will come in attacking areas more than defending areas in most games. They're going to come in the forward ways where you're chasing a goal and you're trying to get something different going. I think part of the challenge that I see with the plan overall that is not necessarily holding United up, but is a consideration in all of this is that, as you go deeper, to some degree, you want your back four not to change like ever. Right. The less your back four changes, the better. Right. Whereas in the front line, it could actually change quite a lot. And it often doesn't really affect how you play as a whole. And I think the problem you have with Wan-Bissaka, and again, why I do think then that Mazroui becomes a really good option, is the other names that you're talking about, Jeremy Frimpong, for example. One doesn't defend. He's not a defender
Yes, that's
at
correct.
all. He's a winger. I mean, he's at best a wing back, but he's pretty much a winger. He's not going to do what Dalot does. He's a different player. Dalot, one of the things that was most impressive was his ability running back towards goal, defending, cleaning up, being the last line of defense, chasing players down. And his defensive work is where he improved from being what I thought was a very mistake-prone, weak player in the past to becoming really important to United. You can't do that with Frimpong. You immediately become much weaker defensively. The other problem is he's going to be nearly 40 million. I don't think you pay 40 million and invest a significant amount of your budget into backup fullbacks. And it's the same with Vanderson, the other name that was linked by Sky Sports today as well. I'm not saying they don't like them, but they're expensive players. These are going to be 40 million players who probably don't want to be the backups in one hand. And it's a lot of money to invest in a backup fullback. You know what I mean? Especially on the right, when you have Dalot, who is one of the most robust players at United, compared to the left, where you might need someone behind Luke Shaw who's really good.
That sounds to me more like a next season signing.
I agree. Yes.
If that's more of a fine tuning signing to me.
Yes.
Where like, okay, I think that a lot of the signings United are making this season are signings that they expect will be important members of the squad.
Yes.
And then next season, okay, we only need 2 or 3. We need to fine tune because they're young. We're bringing in younger players. We're not going to replace these players in a year or two. You're not bringing a 29, 30-year-old, 31-year-old where, you're going to have to look to replace them in a year or two. You have long-term options. Xerxes and Yoro are long-term options.
Yeah.
So these are seasons, assuming they work out as we hope they do, they're not going to need to address next season. This is, of course, how you build. United in the past have always went out, signed a player 30, 31, 32, but you can't build on that because you need to replace them again the following season. You're in exactly the same position, whereas they finally look like they're signing players that they expect to be long-term options. The other course question is Casemiro. So, excuse me, recent reports suggesting that he is less likely to move. That is interesting, James, because I want to believe that Casemiro can still perform at this level the way he did when he first came, but I haven't seen any recent evidence of that which suggests he can.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of crazy because if you watch the preseason games, like we talked about after the first game, not to overreact, but it was same old Casemiro. When I watched the second game, the team as a whole performed way better. Way, way better. I mean, a lot of individuals performed really well. Ahmad was exceptional, right? He was really good. Lenny Yoro showed up and immediately looked good. Like he looked good. And it's not overrating it or anything. He looked good. He made good plays. Casemiro's the same old things. And it's just the habits, going to ground way too easy, abandoning his post, kind of a bit hectic with the passing, these things. And I don't know what to do with that. And part of the problem is that the Saudi clubs that were looking before have changed their strategy a little bit in terms of this window. They're not really pursuing a lot of the older players on big money wages like they were before, but looking for younger, more, to really build the league, which makes sense. I understand it. They've got the big names. They attracted a lot of eyes and attention. And now they want to actually build their teams with younger players that aren't just there for the money, and are going to play. And they had some definite, failures with some of these older players. They paid big money to come out there. And so that's left not a lot of room for Casemiro in terms of interest. And his wages are such a problem that there's very, very few clubs in Europe that are going to be looking at paying anything on him. So I wish it was to say that it was because of everybody's turned over a new leaf and he's going to be exceptional, but I think it comes down to more the lack of options. And that's not to say everybody can't get along or that he won't be professional or anything like that. It's not suggesting that at all. But it does present a bit of a problem for United. And I think where things are now a little bit not stuck, but different in the market, because I'm not sure what they do. It's a lot of money tied up, and it's a lot of money they needed to be moved. And, I think kind of across the board, United are a bit sell to buy now. There's been a lot of talk on the finances and things like that. And, it's not that they couldn't spend some more money, but they're not trying to hamstring their future seasons. And so there's a bit of a balancing act, I think, overall now, which is, United could go spend a bunch of money this summer now and put themselves potentially at risk of not being able to spend anything next year. There's still too many unknowns, I think, for that to be a smart plan. But it's creating challenges because they need to sell to buy, but I don't think Casemiro is on his way out.
So then the question becomes, this is a key aspect of Manchester United's season next season. It was an obvious major hole in United's midfield. It was before Casemiro came.
Yeah.
And it is once again. So how did Ineos solve this problem? Because when I'm looking at, if you're going to sell Wan-Bissaka and you're going to use that money to bring in Mazroui, if you're going to sell Victor Lindelof and it's going to help you get over the line with Matthias de Ligt, if you're going to sell some other players, maybe Jadon Sancho, get you Ugarte, I don't know. It would seem to me that that would be a concern, that there has to be a way to find the money to get a player in, that not just a player, but a player in that actually makes a massive difference. They've told Amrabat that and Fiorentina they will not come back in for him. Then there's talk about Xavi Simons, but the question is Xavi Simons and Kobe Mainu. Xavi Simons still a teenager, isn't he? 19, 20?
Pretty young, isn't he? Yeah.
Is that too inexperienced for a midfield?
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. He's 21 now, but it still doesn't really make sense, especially, positionally. He's going to still be more where Mason Mount plays, and you still have Mason Mount, who you had all last season that didn't really play, unless you're selling Bruno, which I really don't think is happening this summer at this point in time. United are not looking to move on their big players at this stage of summer. If someone was going to come in June or in the beginning of the month for a big offer for Rashford or Bruno, they would have taken more of a look at it. I don't think they're interested now. We're 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, 2.5 weeks out from the, from the Community Shield and then the season starting. They're not looking to make those huge sweeping sales now this summer. They're just not. So it becomes less likely. And I think where you look at it is you have a weird problem here because we're actually down a man from last year in a lot of ways. We had Amrabat last year, and he's not a member of United at this point in time and is unlikely to come back.
And I don't think he did win the cup final if there's no Amrabat either, James.
No. And you have to do something, right? If you had an upgrade on Casemiro and you moved Casemiro to the depth role, maybe, he's on a lot of money and it's not the best plan financially, but it may work. If he's playing less minutes, less of a role, these kind of things, maybe it's a bit more feasible, at least for now, if you can't get a move done. But they have to do something. And I kind of gather that there's nobody in the midfield that's a Xerxes or a Yoro, right? Where they're like, that's our guy and we're gonna go get him. There's nobody like that. And at least in any way that they can afford, because João Neves, you're talking if they were totally convinced on him, you're still talking about 100 million. They just don't have the money for that. It's not going to happen.
But even if you did, where are you putting them? I mean, it's amazing problem all over again.
I agree. And so I think that's why you're looking at it. I think the way that it's now, as best as I can figure out, is that if they could get Ugarte on a good deal and maybe the Sancho thing opens that up, then that's potentially the best solution.
Okay, what about
You know,
this? Scott McTominay. Because
yeah,
Ten Hag says he wants him to stay. I believe Scott McTominay is a very valuable squad player.
yeah.
And he's but if you sell him, he's pure profit, obviously, because of PSR. And these are maybe some of the decisions that Ineos are going to push Ten Hag to make. Lenny Yoro is what, 6'4", is he? He's tall, that thing. So
Yeah.
now you've got Xerxes and Yoro.
Xerxes 6'4" too, yeah.
Right, so you can see that one of the things that United are targeting in the market is athleticism.
Yeah.
It's physique.
Yes.
Because I think that when we were looking at them last season saying they didn't look fit, United were getting bullied off the ball, they were getting bullied on set pieces. You can see that one of the things that is being prioritized is physique. They want big, strong footballers. So McTominay is one of those, but can you now afford to let him go because you have players in the team that are of that, similar build with the Xerxes and a Yoro, and again, these might be some of the difficult decisions Ten Hag has to make. Do you sell a Scott McTominay if it gets you a top defensive midfielder?
100% you do. And I think because McTominay does his best work closer to the goal anyway, right? We know that. And now they've added a big player in Xerxes who doesn't really play like necessarily McTominay, but he gives you the flexibility where you could have a forward line with Xerxes and Højlund. And then you've got a lot of height, a lot of physicality, a lot of strength, a lot of speed in there. We know that Bruno would prefer anyway to not have McTominay occupying his kind of positions. Further up the pitch, and he does his best work there. We saw that at the end of the season, right? In the cup final, the further you can get Bruno involved in that front line, the better, and not push him back. So I think you do, and I think that they would. I think it's really going to come down to Scott himself because he's got offers and he has interest and he has clubs talking to him. Part of the game that's being played a little bit is that they don't want to accept 15, 20 million from McTominay.
Of course, no, should they?
He's worth a lot more than that. And he's worth more than that if you're trying to replace him too. You need better. So I think these are, I kind of see it like our windows a little bit like phase 1 and phase 2. And we've completed phase 1, which is like these top young players that are for the future, for the future that we don't want to miss. And now it's kind of untangling the rest of the squad a bit because there's a lot of tangles. These are problems that are inherited, right? We got lucky, we had Rafael Varane leaving, so there was a spot for Lenny Yoro. We have Anthony Martial leaving, so there's a spot for Joshua Xerxes. We've got a tangle here because you have Christian Eriksen. What's he going to do next year? We don't know. Mason Mount returns. When's Christian Eriksen going to play? We paid 60 million for Mason Mount. Scott McTominay, who again, even same problem. If Mason Mount had been healthy all last year, I don't know how much McTominay would have played, if at all, right? Casemiro, who we can't shift. You have a bit of a mess in these areas that has to be untangled, and some of it's going to come down to the players if they want to leave or not.
I think for Ten Hag, James, one of the problems for him is last season still so fresh in people's mind, and he's going to have to find solutions to the problems that were so obvious last season. One of those being the balance in midfield.
Yeah,
and when the pros and cons of playing Scott McTominay were he gave you goals, but the problems are that United were wide open in midfield.
Yes.
This is also the issue with Mason Mount, is that he is a very, very good footballer, in the right team, but I don't know how United can find balance in that midfield. Ten Hag cannot start next season with exactly the same problems, even if they're scraping wins. If United are scraping wins like they were last season at times where, they were conceding 25 shots in the game, balanced.
He would have been gone by Christmas.
The Wolves game, if he starts next season the way he started last season, scraping a 1-0 win in a game that they really should have lost, the pressure is going to build on him so fast. And he has to look at that midfield and go, look, the first thing that has to get fixed next season is the balance in that midfield, the gaps between the defense and the forward. This has to get fixed. Probably more important than anything else, right?
100%. I'm with you.
Also, he has to get goals from other players than one particular player dominating right? Like first season he had that with Rashford, and so he has to make sure that that there's a variety of goals in that team, that they can control games from possession with possession, and that there isn't massive gaps. Otherwise, even if he's winning games, but if he's winning them by close margins, it won't be enough. And I'll tell you something that stood out for me at Rangers, James, was the presence of Ruud van Nistelrooy on the sideline and the type of presence that he had, because he had the presence of a manager on the sideline.
He did, and I was doing a little
I'm
video on
telling
it.
you,
I
I
know,
think
I
Ten
know, I know.
Hag has
I was
invaded
doing a
the
video.
fox into the chicken coop, because I'm looking at this and I'm going, mate, you have invaded your assassin into your house, because if this goes wrong, okay?
I know, and
you have to know this.
I know, and I'm not trying to be, negative on Ten Hag at all. I really am not at all. But I said the same thing on a video, and I said it to a couple of people. I said, I noticed it in the first game, Van Nistelrooy out of his seat, running to the sidelines, yelling at people and instructing them. And then I noticed it even more in the second game, and he's having those conversations. And I'm thinking, this is not an assistant manager. This is a deputy manager. That's what he's doing at this point in time, essentially.
Is it like having problems in your marriage and asking John Ty to come live with you?
Yeah.
Like, hold on here. Is that the smartest? Anyway, I'm just saying.
No. But he does, and look, it's a positive for the club, right? Let's look at it this way: it's a positive for the team because he does have a presence. He really has a presence, Van Nistelrooy, and you would expect that from him, right? Given his history and who he is and all of that. But he has a presence, and when people talk about that kind of thing, I'm not trying to insult Ten Hag or anything in the slightest. But Van Nistelrooy, certainly, he is there. You can see it from the TV that he is there, and I think that's a good thing for everybody. But certainly, I think it'll help Ten Hag too. I think it'll help him maintain control and all of that as well. But yeah, these are the problems you have to solve. And to be fair, I think there is an adjustment that they've already made in the midfield setup that was better. And I noticed it in the first game, and I noticed it more in the second as well. And we'll talk, and I think it'll lead us to talking about Toby Collier as well.
Yeah, because they're going to bring him into the first team, and they've allegedly told him he has a chance. Yeah. This is what we said about the first game, is that this was really what these preseason games are for these kids. Yeah. One or two kids emerged, said, okay, you know what, I wasn't in the picture, I wasn't in the discussion, but guess what, I am now.
Yeah, and he worked. I mean, he looks like he's working to earn that. When he's on the pitch, you could see that in the minutes that he played. Positives, he looks physically ready for men's football. I would say that about Collier. He looks physically ready for men's football. He's quick. He gets about really well. He eats up ground and put himself around. The other change that was made in the two games is that instead of this sole holding midfielder that was Casemiro, with the other midfielders just running off into the attack, it was much more a partnership once again, like we'd seen in years past. And people used to complain about it a lot when it was like Fred and Scott being deep together. But Collier and Casemiro were on the same line, right? Instead of one being way up and one down. And in the first game, Mason Mount was actually deeper with Hannibal in the 10. And in this game, Mount was in the 10 and Collier was on the same line as Casemiro. And that obviously makes the midfield have less space for the opponent. The other factor is the high line, right? Pushing up higher from the defense, just naturally, like there's tactical ways to solve this. And Lenny Yoro, one of the reasons I was really, really, really hoping to sign him, same reason I wanted Gerard Braithwaite way more than De Ligt from a tactical standpoint, is that Lenny Yoro is exceptional defending spaces behind him. There's center backs who are better going forward and being aggressive, like Lisandro Martinez, right? Where he's better when he steps up. Well, De Ligt is the same. He's better when he steps up. And I was a little worried about that, if that was going to be where it would go. But the Braithwaite, for the same reason, very fast running backwards, right? Very fast running towards his own goal and covering the spaces, similar to Varane. I mean, we saw Varane partner Lisandro that way. He's better going backwards into space. And I think that allows you to have the high line, because that's where Lisandro's not the fastest player in an open sprint. He's good stepping into the up forward. Harry Maguire, the same thing. He's actually quite good stepping forward. He's not good turning and running backwards.
Sure.
But that's where Lenny Yoro is delaying the attacker, slowing the play down, and giving your team time to catch up. And most good center back partnerships like Rio and Vidic and Varane and Ramos had that one player doing that job. So I think that's going to help us move the line higher. I did notice Onana pushing up more as well, which we saw. There was a change in the goalkeeper's coach from a coach who was more to do with, you know, the old style keepers. He's been there for a long time, and it's not an insult as to his ability. It's just he's from a different era of football, and he helped coach De Gea to his best seasons as a more traditional goalkeeper. But I think that, so aside from personnel, there is, to be fair, an active adjustment from the coaching staff, including Ten Hag, to close this gap. Because, you know, if you got this huge space, if you can push this up and you can move this down, of course there's less space. It's just natural, just automatic. And I noticed Wheatley, which created some of the best chances, also dropping in as a striker more to close the gaps down instead of just sitting on the back shoulder. And that allowed, you know, Ahmad and Sancho to actually make a lot of runs by him. And I think that's how Xerxes will play too. So some interesting adjustments that this is what you want to see in preseason, them actually working to solve these problems. But that's not to say they don't need a player. I'm just saying, I think ideally that minimizes some of the problems that you've had. And then if you can also add a player, which I'm sure they will, we just don't know who, it'll help improve things overall.
Well, Ahmad was excellent against Rangers. Took his goal very, very well. Ironically, United play Arsenal next. Were some bad memories of that game last season. Of course, was a game that Ahmad did get injured in, if I remember correctly.
Kabi Mainu actually got injured in that game.
Did Mainu not get injured in the Real Madrid game?
Yeah, no. No, you might be right. You're right. It was. You have it. You have it.
So, so big game against Arsenal this weekend. Very, like I said, very encouraging with Ahmad. I've always felt that he, in my opinion, the way he finished the season, I wanted to see more of him. And I always felt that if United got rid of him, they'd regret it, because I think there's an exceptional player in there. Arsenal this weekend. What do you expect from this game?
I'm expecting growth on the last one. There's going to be a few more players back. Marcus Rashford missed the last one with a small knock that they just didn't want to risk because the US tour and these are the serious games. I think these three upcoming, they really want to see the first team in these big games now and see how they can perform. And, you know, what you practice is what you want to play. That's how it works. So I think we'll see it was not a weak lineup last time, but I think a little bit stronger. I think, you know, Højlund is back as well, returned to training today, so he'll be on a tour and could be ready to play on Saturday. So I expect we'll see closer. I think the second game was closer, and I expect the next game is going to be even closer to the way that we want to play in the season and how we want to set up. And I think it'll be quite strong. We'll maybe see like Maguire partnering Lenny Yoro. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. He wasn't quite ready, but he should be by the weekend. And otherwise, the thing I'd be most curious about is if we see Toby Collier again with the first team.
Yeah, I don't think you'll see like they saw at Rangers, where you'll see a complete 11 players.
Maybe 60 minutes this time. Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, if you go back to last season, right, it was really after the Arsenal game, the Real Madrid game, where United started to show a dip in form. And you didn't think it was that significant at the time. You know, the Dortmund game, didn't think it was that significant at the time. But actually, it was quite indicative of what we saw later on in the season, where they were giving goals away in the first 5 minutes of games, the first 5 minutes of the second half, and you know, they weren't able to control games, and they took that form into the season. Now, this is where I think preseason starts to matter. Okay, I don't think the results are the be all and end all, but they're not insignificant. They don't. It's not that they don't matter. This is where they start to matter. Where, you know, you can still lose and perform into the season, but having a bad preseason is not the way you want to start your season. Having a good preseason doesn't guarantee you'll start well. And having a bad one makes it even less likely.
For sure, like you say, it's not everything, and I just want to say, there obviously people talk about the Van Gaal preseason where he won a bunch of games and then started the season poorly. The only thing I would say about that is United did play the exact same in preseason as they did during the season. It was just against much tougher competition, and because you saw the same slowness, the same kind of very possession heavy passing, crossing style across the preseason into the season. And we have seen that with Ten Hag. Regardless of the results in his first season, the way we played in the first preseason, it went really well. When we started the season, it went poorly, but we played the same football, the same setup, the same midfield, the same everything. It just didn't work once we actually got into the real games. So I think it is meaningful in that how we practice in these games and how we execute in those games is going to be how we start the season. And it's hard to say what the results will be like, but the better we can perform in there and the less problems we see showing up, the better, for sure. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. It would be better to keep the momentum. And I thought the second game was much more encouraging in that respect.
I agree. Okay, mate. Anything else before we go? We've been rabbiting here for nearly an hour.
No, I think that's mostly it. Obviously, I think we'll just have to see now. United definitely exploring what to do now in these positions: the center back, the fullback, the midfield, and I think soon we'll see them execute, kind of to make those decisions. And once they do, they'll move forward. But it feels the other thing that I think does happen, worth mentioning, is that when they go on these tours for a week and a half to another country, business slows down a little bit. It always does. So we'll probably see them. I wouldn't be surprised if nothing really happened, in terms of any done deals over the next week and a half.
Interesting on that, because with United having a much more comprehensive team and working on simultaneous deals at the same time, I do wonder if it will stop. I don't know, because you're right, it normally does, but I just wonder if it'll be any different this year, because I think that we're dealing with a whole different team. But yeah, usually,
it's usually more logistical. Like, it gets complicated getting players in and out of different countries, and
the fact that a number of those talents are still on holiday after the Euros and they hook up and all does complicate it too.
Yeah, I think now's the time to line it up. And then once they return after Columbus, after the Liverpool game, in that week leading up to the Community Shield, I think you'll see the last kind of moves unfold and happen. And I would expect, at least one or two more things to come in that week.
I still think by the end of the window we'll be looking at another 3 signings maybe, because I still think there'll be a few that will leave. I still think at the very least you're looking at a defensive midfielder, someone that can play left back, and possibly a right back if they move Juan Bissaka on. Okay, man, I will see you later on in the week. Thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast. As always, we will be back next week, possibly maybe some content later on in the week, with United being here. We will see. But thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast and everything else. Take it easy, man.
Yes, you too. See you later.